You are listening to the Beyond Canon podcast.
In the first part, we saw how religious objects help to support theological doctrines. The footprints on the Mount of Olives conveyed the central dogma of Christ's full humanity. He indeed was one of us. It would, however, be very naive to reduce the function of material religion to representing theological ideas. There is more to it, as we will see when we turn our attention to other footprints of Jesus. In Rome, close to the ancient Appian Way, there is a small church called Santa Maria in Palmis. Just behind the main door, visitors are presented a marble slab with two footprints. The text around the footprints explains, "These are Christ's footprints, left after his appearance to Peter." Let us leave aside the fact that this stone is only a replica, and the original stone is housed in the nearby Basilica San Sebastiano. And let us ignore that the marble slab probably stems from a pagan temple dedicated to Ridiculus, the god of return. What is more interesting is the link that this material object establishes between a certain location and an apocryphal story. It evokes the scene that in 1951 the movie Quo Vadis has made famous. During the persecution under Nero, Peter flees on the Appian Way out of town. Near the city gate, Jesus appears to him. Peter asks, "Lord, where are you going?" Quo vadis? Christ replies, "I am going to Rome to be crucified again." This sentence makes Peter return to Rome and accept his crucifixion. This story was not invented by the Polish writer Henryk Sienkiewicz, who in 1896 had received the Nobel Prize for his novel Quo Vadis, the movie was based upon. The story is already part of the Acts of Peter, Greek and Latin texts that were written beginning in the 2nd century. Like many similar texts, these Acts narrate what is not to be found in the Bible. And like most of these texts, the Quo Vadis scene also takes its starting point from a Bible verse. In the Gospel according to John, Peter asks the Lord, "Where are you going?" And the Lord replies, "Where I am going you cannot follow me, but later you will follow me." Such narratives do not only augment a biblical story, they also contribute to creating a new sacred topography outside the Holy Land. The Christians of the city of Rome produced their own religious landscape with Peter's grave, his prison, his chains, as well as the relics of numerous other saints. Christ's relics, in particular, helped to make Rome a new Holy Land, including the cradle, parts of his cross, and his footprints. In some versions of the Acts of Peter, the apostle even sees the Lord ascending, thus strengthening the parallel between the events outside the walls of Jerusalem and the Quo Vadis scene, close to the Appian Gate of Rome. Places were linked with stories and developed into places of memory. The French historian PIERRE NORA popularized the term lieu de mémoire to indicate such places, but also objects and rituals that have certain symbolic significance in the memory of a community and contribute to forming a collective identity. All over the world, not only in Jerusalem and Rome, Christians are proud of their own footprints of Jesus, in Kashmir in India, in the Philippines, in Kenya, and also in Egypt. In 1984, when Egyptian workers were digging a sewer line to a church in the town Saqqara, they discovered a stone slab with a small footprint. On the reverse side, they read the Arab word Allah. Had they discovered, they wondered, the famous relic of the Coptic church that had gone lost centuries ago? The Bicha Isus, the footprint of the child Jesus? The Pope of the Coptic Church had to decide. Patriarch Shenouda prayed over the stone again and again, and finally declared, yes, it is the authentic Bicha Isus. Ever since, Coptic Christians traveled to Saqqara, throw prayer notes into the shrine of the relic, and buy oil that had been poured into the footprint and collected. On the 1st of June, on the feast of the entry of the Lord Christ to Egypt, the stone is carried in a procession through the church. And the liturgical texts explain, the child Jesus, his mother Mary and Joseph crossed the Nile to the western side. In this place the Lord Jesus put his foot on a stone, and the trace of his foot appeared, and the stone was called Bicha Isus in Coptic, the heel of Jesus. This scene is part of a longer tradition which has turned Egypt into a holy land. The Gospel, according to Matthew, just reports that the Holy Family fled to Egypt, but the legend tells more. The vision of Theophilus of the 5th century narrates what the 2-year-old Jesus experienced in Egypt. Patriarch Theophilus, it is told, received the details about the stay in Egypt from Mary, who appeared to him. The child travels through Egypt, works miracles, encounters the 2 thieves who would later be crucified alongside Jesus, and stays in a house on a mountain for several years before they return to Judea. Apparently, the story collects local traditions. Many cities and villages in Egypt tried to inscribe their history into the holy story of Jesus. And the creative process of producing new sites of memory with new holy stories went on. His footprints, still lacking in the vision of Theophilus, turn up around the year 700 in a sermon by the bishop Zechariah of Saqqara. All these places were connected by a pilgrim's path. Pilgrims, having taken a long way from Constantinople, Old Rome, or even distant Gaul or the British Isles, when visiting the Holy Land, took the opportunity for an excursion to Egypt. While they visited the living saints, the hermits and monasteries of Egypt, they also followed the traces they believed little Jesus had left when traveling through the Nile Delta with his parents. Even today, you can book a Holy Family tour officially approved by the Pope of the Coptic Church. In the cases of Rome and Egypt, we discover another function that religious objects serve. They are not only materializations of religious ideas, they also bind stories to certain places and thus help to establish a religious topography. It was the French sociologist Émile Durkheim who pointed out the eminent role of sacred objects for a group's identity. Religious life is structured by what he calls the totemic principle, by objects held sacred to represent the sanctity of the group. Another French sociologist, Maurice HALBWACHS, built upon this idea and augmented it with the spatial dimension when, in the 1930s, he developed his theory of a collective memory, a memory that, so to speak, exists outside the individuals, in social groups, and is preserved in narratives, in rituals, in places, spaces, and artifacts. Interestingly enough, in 1941, he exemplified this idea with the Holy Land in his book La topographie légendaire des évangiles en Terre Sainte, étude de mémoire collective. He presented Judea-Palestine as a paradigm for a landscape of memory, full of religious spaces, places, and objects that were integrated in the social life of Christians by rituals. Feasts on certain days, dates of commemoration, processions and pilgrimages on which the pilgrims tried to follow the footsteps of the Lord, reaching the climax of their path at the footprint on the Mount of Olives. Hence, religious objects like the stone with the footprint, beyond representing theological ideas, also fulfill a social function. They unite religious individuals by focusing their common attention on a certain object and the stories, ideas, and rituals surrounding it, thus contributing to a collective memory and a common social identity. However, there is also a quite different approach to the footprint, an approach which takes its lead from thing theory.
Thank you for listening to the Beyond Canon podcast.